live on the internet.
And we are live.
Hello.
Hello, internet.
Welcome. We have a special guest here, David McAfee from AMD. Hello, David.
Hey, everybody. Good to see you.
Gordon,
hey.
Gordon's
Sorry,
live from the bridge.
I'm locked up. My browser seems to have locked up. Chrome has been doing this weird thing where it just stops responding for about a couple of minutes. So it'll be back. But yeah, so hey, we have a special edition planned today. We want to thank David McAfee from AMD joining us to talk about. Oh, and now it's come back. I think
That was me. Wow.
Hello.
Rookie move. Did not
Bumble.
mute the stream on my end. My bad.
It's a Thursday here, so you know.
Thursday, getting light, and we're over the middle of the week. Everybody getting ready for the weekend, but obviously there's some hot topics to talk about, and David is kindly going to share his time with us to discuss what he can. Come on, browser, come back. It just won't come back. Okay.
You trying to retweet it?
I can't. Like everything's just frozen. So.
And David, bizarre. you're coming from Texas. That's where you're based out of.
That's right. Based in Texas. Spend my time at the AMD headquarters in Austin.
Nice. All right. How's the weather down there right now? You're not out for hot chips. I know hot chips is going on.
No, all you have to do is go outside and you get the feeling of hot chips.
There you go.
It's like living on the surface of the sun right now.
Nice. All right. Yeah. Luckily, we don't have to do it. It's cold, actually, in the
like
area.
Cloudy and cold here, of course.
Yeah.
That's
San Francisco weather, right? It's always go everywhere with the jacket.
Cool. But we got David for a little bit of time, so let's we might as well go straight into it. Hi, all friends of the show. Everybody's here. We got some good questions. If you have a question at the Full Nerd, and we'll try to get them answered with David on the show. So. You ready, Gordon?
Just about. Now that my browser's working again.
Oh, good.
There you go.
I've heard Firefox is good. I don't know. I don't use it.
I really do need to explore options, but okay. Sorry, I'm back.
All right.
You want me to do this, or are you going to?
No, you got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Steering the ship, Captain.
AMD's talking. AMD Talks Zen 5 is the title, I think. Yes.
Cool. Yep.
Correct. Okay, got it. Let me know when you're ready.
Nope. Yep. We're ready.
Ready.
All right. Let's do it.
Just kick it off?
Let's do it.
Go ahead.
In this edition of... Okay, I screwed that up already. See, I did screw this up.
It's okay.
In this episode of The Full Nerd, AMD Talks Zen 5. Welcome to a special edition of The Full Nerd. I'm your host, Gordon Ma-Ung, with co-host Brad Charkis.
Hello, yo.
Adam Patrick Murray is sitting at the desk.
I'm here. Welcome.
And our special guest is AMD's David McAfee.
Hey, guys. Good to see you.
And Willis Lai gets credit for running the vertical and horizontal today. So if you got questions, get in the chat, put those questions in. But David's got a tight time schedule. And I know everybody wants to talk about Zen 5. So I guess we should kick this off. David, this week, for people who don't know, this week you guys published a community blog update addressing the Ryzen 9000 launch on desktop. And of course, this follows probably it's fair to say, a tumultuous couple of weeks of Zen 5 coverage. And basically, there's new information that looks like it helps explain why things are a little bit out of sync with reviewers and with AMD this time around. Should I do a recap of this, or David, do you want to do a recap? You're probably better at this than
I can certainly talk about it a little bit. I'll maybe kick us off there. That's a great place to begin. So, I think the truth is, when we announced the Zen 5 core and the 9000 series desktop processors at Computex, what we were seeing, what we collected in our data, showed a fantastic product that really stacked up incredibly well against the competition. And even as we continued development of that product and collected all of our data around the performance of that product, we saw a really, really strong generational uplift and great competitive positioning. And I think, like you said, we were really surprised when the reviews started coming in, and we saw results that were quite different from what we had measured. Over the past few weeks, as we've been getting more and more reports of that, and then started to see the actual reviews publish, we really were digging into peeling the onion and understanding what was going on, and what the differences were between our data versus the reviewers that we were seeing in many of the reviews around our products. And that led us to a few conclusions that really drove the vast majority of those differences. Namely, some of the things around the branch prediction behavior of Windows in the way that we tested the product versus the way that most reviewers tested the product, combined with other factors like virtualization, security settings, and others that really make up the difference there. So I know we're going to get into a lot of the detail there around the product, but I think as we've really dug in and understood what those differences are between how many reviewers tested our products and how we did it, I think we've finally come to the answers of what's driving those differences and what we recommend as the settings to get the absolute most out of your Zen 5 processor.
Okay, and I'll from the blog basically there's 4 bullet points, but I think the thing that kind of gets me that helps, looks like it explains a lot of this is a Windows 11 update that is in the pipeline, it's in the works, and that should, and I can't find the name of it, but it's the one thing that should, it seems like that's the one thing that should fix, or I don't know about fix, but address a lot of the confusion around this.
It really is. I mean, I think the underlying factor is when we built the Zen 5 processor core, there is a re-architecture of the branch prediction engine and an enhancement to that engine that makes it really quite a bit more powerful than previous generations of the Zen CPU core. And as we were analyzing our results versus what we were seeing from the press, what really came to light was we just weren't getting the benefit of that branch prediction engine. And so it turns out that the way we were testing and collected all of our data was done in a way that reflects a set of branch prediction optimizations that were built into a version of Windows that we were collaborating with Microsoft to release to the public. That is live in their 24H2 preview that users can download and install as a part of the insider track. And it really takes a whole level of performance to many games and applications with Zen 5 that isn't visible on the current shipping version of 23H2. That branch prediction, especially with the updated engine in Zen 5, really gives a significant performance uplift. And of course, like, it's going to vary application to application, but some games like Far Cry 6, we're seeing double-digit performance uplift. Some games are closer to small single-digit. I think we saw 3% on Hitman. Really no change on things like Watchdog Legions. And then some other tests, even Office productivity, like the Procyon Office Suite, seeing around a 6% improvement there. So I think the way to think about it, as we really have understood the root cause of this issue, is the more that an application is context switching and pausing threads, the more opportunity you have to see improvement for this optimized branch prediction code that's going into the OS. And so while you might not see it on something like a Cinebench application where it's just kind of one thread that runs beginning to end, in many games and productivity applications, there's a significant amount of uplift there. And I think that is the primary difference that we saw as we really analyzed all of that data.
I got a couple follow-ups on that. So that's in regard, or the way that you said that was because of the new improvements with Zen 5, but it also looks like that this improvement also benefits Zen 4 or Ryzen 7000?
No, that's absolutely right. Zen 4 and Zen 3 CPUs, so I guess that would be 5000 and 7000 CPUs, will also see some uplift as a part of this. It won't be as great as what you see in the Ryzen 9000 series products, but this definitely affects a very broad set of Ryzen processors for anybody that's using them in a Windows 11 environment.
Also, the nomenclature said Windows 11, but will this also apply to Windows 10 users as well?
So, I think the process that we're working through right now is this code is live and shipping, live and available, I should say, for 24H2 users. For instance, if you're buying a brand new Ryzen AI 300 based notebook, that was another product that we launched at Computex called Strix, which features the Zen 5 CPU core. Those systems from OEMs today are shipping with the 24H2 OS. But for somebody who is a desktop user who has their own install of Windows, that upgrade comes a little bit later this year. At the same time, we're working with Microsoft on backporting this to the existing version of Windows, as well as going back to previous versions of the operating system to make sure that all 9000 series users have access to the most performance that we can give them out of a Zen 5 CPU.
And to be clear, if it wasn't explicitly stated, but the testing suite in the Ryzen 9000 desktop, the AMD guided benchmarks was using that updated version of Windows.
In a manner of speaking, yes. If I'm going to get super technical about splitting hairs between that statement and how we tested, what I would really say is through our automation suite that runs all of the data collection that we do across all of our products, it runs in a mode which very closely emulates the branch prediction optimizations that are in 24H2 and available to end users. So I guess maybe that's a minor difference in your statement there, but it is awfully close to one and the same between the shipping version of 24H2 and how we tested through our automation suite.
And that's due to, I think what's loosely being called the super admin mode that sort of popped up.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
That I'm a little confused here because I thought I sort of originally when I read the blog post, I assumed that the 24H2 version had this updated support for Zen 5 cores and that will address the branch prediction. But then it seems like if you're running the blog post makes it seem like if you're running the super admin mode, it sort of activates the same thing. But is it?
In a manner of speaking, yes, Gordon, it does. I guess what I would say is for an end user, we do not recommend running games and applications in super admin mode. It does a number of things in your system and bypasses a number of the security measures that are in place in Windows. I guess maybe, again, to kind of dig into this a little bit more, the way to think about it is, what admin mode does is strips away a lot of the security layers in Windows and allows you to run in a more sort of bare metal performance mode, if you want to think about it that way. What this update in 24H2 and the branch prediction optimization in the Windows kernel does is very similar, right? It gets you much closer to bare metal performance with all of the security measures still around the way that we operate in the Windows kernel. So just to be absolutely clear, not recommending people play games and run applications on their system in super admin mode. That creates a lot of exposure to some very bad things that could happen to your system. We believe that 24H2 with the optimizations that have been put in place in the Windows kernel give you all of that performance, but do so in a way that keeps you very safe from a security posture on a Ryzen processor in Windows.
Well, I think the follow-up question, and some people have this as well, then can you explain the reasoning why AMD Labs uses that super admin mode, even though it's not recommended for normal users?
Yeah, I would say that historically, when our automation framework was built, the difference between performance in super admin mode and what you would consider to be more user mode testing was really negligible. There was very little difference there. That has changed over time, and so I would say that quite honestly, it was probably a change that we were blind to as we collected this data. Didn't see that difference because for several generations we had really been using that same framework to collect data through our automation suite. So clearly an oversight on our part. Clearly something where we were a bit disconnected from how reviewers were testing these applications and how users were playing games on their systems. And that's been corrected in the way that we collect data for our products going forward.
So, no, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so yeah, like just to expand off that. So going forward, people can look for, updated AMD numbers for Ryzen 9000, or you mean for future CPU launches that I know you can't get into?
Well, I think certainly, as we look at the way that we talk about the performance of our products for Ryzen 9000 series, yes, absolutely. Like we're collecting all of that data all over again. We're doing that with the 24H2 build of Windows. I think in the very near future, when that is live and available to the public, you'll see updated performance from us as we build marketing materials for our 9000 series products. But certainly as we go forward, I think there's a very big lesson learned here that testing in a mode that mirrors exactly the way that our technical press who review our products, as well as our end users who are using our products, like there's no shortcuts for that. And that's something you'll see from us going forward is a much more true to life reflection of the way these products are being tested and used by the press and end users.
David, I do have a question about that though, because I understand why the super admin mode is used, because obviously your automation suite sort of requires it to run and all that. But and I understand you want to get closer to how the technical press tests everything, but can you ever do that? I mean, it's a hardware vendor, because I can tell you every morning when I have a review that goes up on hardware, I go and look at somebody else's and it never matches anybody else's. It's always off a little bit. So you're right, Gordon. I mean, I think that there's a couple of different factors here. And I'll say that, by and large, gaming is the one workload that has the greatest amount of variance when you look from one review to the other. And man, that could even be in exactly the same setup where it's same motherboard, same BIOS, same graphics card, even same game. But depending on how that reviewer tests it, they may choose to use the built-in benchmark. They may have a specific scene in that game that they like to test. And even within an individual game, that sort of balance within the system of portions of the game, which, lean heavier on the CPU versus lean heavier on the GPU, result in massive differences in, relative performance comparisons between product A and product B. I think you can look at many games and, find one place in the game where you see significant separation between two products, and move to another scene in the game and, you effectively get parity between the two. So it is almost impossible to imagine a future where, everyone, every reviewer, every end user sees exactly the same thing. And I know that, as this set of reviews for the 9000 series came out, me personally looking through probably, 60, 70 reviews around the world, you see a lot of variance in how people test their products. And that's game selection, that's individual choices within the game, that's graphics cards, memory settings, security settings. That is one of the things that we really address in the Post-it community is, there are a lot of variables that go into testing a modern CPU product. And I think that's one of the reasons why in any CPU review, looking at reviews around the globe, you see quite a bit of variation and a big range in the conclusions and performance scores. But in this case, there were also some underlying factors that really muddied the water even further, and we wanted to clear that up for our Ryzen users.
And if I can ask, just so people might help understand, like what is AMD's goals with doing internal testing and having that in a review guide? Is that to try to say all reviewers should test it the same way? Is that to say, hey, here's just at least a general baseline? Like what is AMD's goals with doing this kind of testing?
Yeah, I think that first and foremost, when it comes to just the reasons why we test and how we test and what we provide to reviewers, at the end of the day, when we do that internal testing, part of the reason that that testing is automated is it happens across multiple labs around the world. It happens across hundreds and hundreds of systems, different motherboard manufacturers, different X series boards, B series boards, and different lots of manufacturing as well. And so what we want to make sure of as we build a product is for a Ryzen 9700X, we deliver consistent performance on that part, regardless of what motherboard you plug it into, regardless of what site in the world you're testing on or what manufacturing lot it may have come from. So ensuring that we've got a consistent product and consistent performance is job number one with the testing that we do. Now, the reason we put that forward to reviewers in a guide where we'll publish tables with results that we've been able to generate in our labs really boils down to, we want to make sure that as reviewers get their system, as you set up and you do kind of your baselining before you get into all of your game testing, that you're seeing something similar. And I think this Cinebench example that I talked about a moment ago is a really important data point to look at. So 23H2 running in user mode versus 24H2 running in user mode, we effectively saw zero difference in the Cinebench scores between those two. And like Cinebench is a great example of something where, as a reviewer, you probably set your systems up, you probably look at some baseline benchmarks that you always run like Cinebench to see, am I close to hitting the results that the processor manufacturer is seeing? And in this case, like, it wouldn't have been the warning signal to say, man, there's really something wrong here. Something's off with this system. We need to dig deeper. I think the issue here is it really wasn't until we got into that game testing where you see these massive variances. And then it goes back to what Gordon was talking about a moment ago, right? Just because every test methodology for games is so different, even if you see some variance, it wasn't necessarily the red flag that it should have been, to say, like, stop, there's something really going on here. We've got to understand the underlying factors that are driving these differences between what we saw and what the press saw.
Yeah, and I do want to point out for people who are not used to what we're talking about, as far as the reviewer's guide, those are generally internal documents. They're generally not intended to be shared with the public. I know your competitors have given me reviewers' guides that are not intended to be shared with the public as well. But it's for people who think like, oh, they give you these numbers and you should get exactly the same thing, and they're not. Like, for again, like you hit it how I do it. I will set up a new system, a new CPU. I'll run Cinebench to make sure, okay, I'm in the ballpark. I'm going to run these games, these applications the way I do it. And if it's different than the way it is from Intel, NVIDIA, or AMD, so be it, because we just do things differently. I just want to make sure that the regular person doesn't think like, oh, they should all be exactly the same for everybody, because it's not. It's just simply, even in Photoshop, if you're doing a Photoshop test, it could be different just on the setup. So I think
that's right.
I just want to make sure people understand that.
I guess the other thing that I would say that is really important about AMD publishing that to all of the members of the press is it is also a disclosure around how we configure the AMD systems as well as the competitive systems. That's things like what version of the BIOS are we using, what version of Windows, driver versions, security settings within Windows, various power level settings, et cetera. So it is intended to be a comprehensive disclosure of the totality of how the system is set up, so that we can get as close to reproducing the same results across all of the different members of the press in the world that are looking at these products at the same time.
And the same thing would apply then to the Intel testing that you're doing, because obviously there are numbers for the competition in there as well. Can you talk a little bit more about the thought process behind, how do you test versus the competition and include those numbers?
Yeah, I guess there's two things to be clear on there. Number one is when we're talking about this branch prediction optimization, this is something that affects the Ryzen processors. This really has it is a code path that is specific to AMD processors for Zen 3, 4, and 5. It does not really have any bearing on the performance or capability of the Intel processor. So I just want to make sure I'm crystal clear on that point. And I think the second point is, if you look back to when we were gathering this competitive data, there was a set of power settings and configurations that we chose for the Intel systems that were informed by their guidance at that point in time. Remember, it's been a pretty tumultuous journey to get to the point where there's a clear set of recommendations around, power settings, current, et cetera. We tested using balance mode, which was, in our opinion, the most representative representation of what Intel was recommending at the time. And I think as we've done subsequent testing, we found that has a small impact on performance as well. Without a doubt, it has nowhere near the level of impact to things like the branch prediction optimization that we were talking about a moment ago. But just in full disclosure, that's how we looked at the competitive systems at that point in time.
I had a question about VBS and this branch prediction thing, because in my brain, I can't quite separate the two, or because it feels like, are there actually two separate issues, or is it
two separate issues?
Okay.
Two separate issues. Yeah. And just, okay, I'm not a security expert, nor do I claim to be one, but I'll give you my layman's view of it. VBS, or virtualization-based security, is essentially an operating mode within Windows that requires certain flags to be configured in BIOS such that the operating system can run with the Windows kernel effectively in a hypervisor. And that allows for protection against a wide range of attacks on the system that you wouldn't otherwise have if you're running with virtualization-based security turned off. Now, this goes all the way back, I think, to the transition from Windows 10 to Windows 11, where at least for systems that ship from OEMs like Dell, HP, Lenovo, Asus, all of those systems are configured to run with virtualization-based security turned on. And honestly, it's AMD's recommendation that everyone run with virtualization-based security turned on. I'm probably going to misquote the figure here, but I think there's data that Microsoft has published that says, like something to the effect of 2/3 of attacks on PCs could have been avoided if virtualization-based security was enabled on those platforms. So it really is a big deal for the end user. It is a significant enhancement to the security posture of the system. And in the early days of Windows, especially on older AMD processors, there was quite a bit of a difference between performance, especially in games, with virtualization-based security turned on versus turned off. I think as time has gone on, that gap has narrowed. I think some of the latest data that I've seen, it's sort of in the 1 to 3% range on our Zen 3, Zen 4 type of processors. In the Zen 5 generations, we've made incremental enhancements to the design so that performance in virtualization mode versus bare metal is much closer to parity between the two. So it's actually a really small delta between the two when you look at performance with virtualization-based security on versus off. So, our belief is with Ryzen processors, modern Ryzen processors, and especially with Zen 5, whether you're a gamer or a content creator, running with virtualization-based security turned on is absolutely the recommendation from AMD. We've also done a full scan with all of our motherboard manufacturers. Their boards are set up so that out of the box with the shipping BIOS that's on those boards, they're configured so that Windows installs with virtualization-based security enabled when you install Windows on those platforms. And we really think, from a security standpoint, again, it's the right thing to do.
Okay. So, I mean, that's definitely going into the testing part of it. Really good insight into there. Thank you. I think the other part of it that people, have questions around or the...
I have a couple of questions around testing.
Oh, yeah, go for it. Sorry.
Sorry. I just had a couple of questions. One, in your internal testing that you guys did to display these at Computex, do you guys not test it on like the current shipping version of Windows? Because this is clearly a difference between the unreleased version of Windows that's coming in a month or two versus what's available now. Did you guys spot that beforehand?
Well, I think to be very accurate there, what we tested for Computex, for instance, was running the current shipping build of Windows 23H2, but it was run in the super admin mode that we were talking about that bypasses a number of the security layers in Windows and gets closer to bare metal performance. So it's that case of just an oversight of how much of a performance delta there was in those two operating modes.
Okay, that makes sense. My other question, I don't know if you have any insight into this, but I was wondering how you pick the games that you test, because there's been some criticism that it's mostly older games.
That's a really good question, and there's been a lot of discussion around that. The truth is, with every review cycle that we do, we go out and, like I said, we'll read all of the reviews, we'll scan what games are being run, in what mode, what scenes are being tested, what the typical hardware configuration in terms of memory, graphics, et cetera, is used on those tests. And I would say that by and large, there's been a relatively stable set of games that have been used in those tests that are a bit more CPU centric. If I look at the lists of the type of games that get tested for CPU reviews and how they get tested versus the type of games and settings that are used for GPU reviews, it's almost sort of night and day, right? Because what you end up with is those CPU reviews tend to be 1080p, higher ultra settings, where you're really trying to put as much burden onto the CPU as you can. And they also tend to focus on, let's call it, older games that are more CPU centric, less GPU bound, if you want to think it that way, so that you can see the separation in performance between CPU A and CPU B a bit more. On the graphics side, totally different story. There it's 4K, it's ray tracing, it's the absolute most GPU bound scenario that you can create for reviewing a graphics card on a platform. And I would say that without a doubt, one of the things that we have seen in this review is more of a shift to modern games that people are playing day in and day out, as opposed to more of those games that were used historically or traditionally in CPU testing. And some of those games, I think that was a shift that happened a little bit quicker than we would have anticipated. I think, without a doubt, as we look forward into upcoming products, you'll see a lot more modern game suite from us as we look at relative performance comparisons between processor A and processor B.
Okay, thank you. I guess my one last question along this line is, do you have a sense for whether more modern games are affected more heavily by the branch prediction improvements in Zen 5?
I would say it varies greatly by the game title and how the game title interacts with the processor. And I think, just to use a couple of examples there, I think I mentioned a minute ago that, or at least in our community post, there's Cyberpunk 2077 is a game where we saw significant uplift, 7% uplift, with the branch prediction optimization versus without it. And I think that's a pretty good example of a modern game. Not included in the table, but there's plenty of examples of other modern games. And if memory serves me correctly, I think Starfield is one where there's very little difference between branch prediction optimizations in versus out. And so I think it really does depend on the game. It depends on how much that game really taxes the CPU and GPU, and how the different threads of the game interact and context switch, so that you're generating, sort of those branch prediction switches as a part of the code executing on the platform.
Okay, that'll make sense. Thank you. I'm done asking testing questions.
Okay, and look, I will admit, as we have dug into this, I think one of the things we've certainly seen is it's very, very hard to just sort of predict from a game title, or even from a specific game engine that a title is built on, exactly how it's going to behave, and sort of what that similarity is across a set of titles. But I think that clearly there is a trend that is, as games become more visually immersive, as graphics cards become more powerful, the GPU is more and more becoming the bottleneck in the gameplay experience. And that separation you see between different processors in a lot of cases compresses a bit.
Well, no, go ahead.
So, sorry, I got a couple quick testing questions because David's time is valuable. I was kind of surprised by that uplift in Procyon Office, and my question is, obviously that you're attributing a lot of that to the branch predictor update. Are we expecting to see that elsewhere pop up as we kind of go through more content creation and sort of standard applications that we're using? Because I thought this would have been mostly gaming, and basically what I'm trying to.
But I think the thing is, if you think about the characteristics of an application, which is doing branch prediction and changing context frequently, something like office productivity, even working in content creation applications like Photoshop, I think there could be some difference that you will see, and certainly Procyon was a part of our suite that we disclosed. I am certain that there will be others as a part of that. I guess the bigger takeaway for me is that in the current way that the Windows operating system 23H2 does branch prediction on Zen 5, it is sub-optimized for what that processor is capable of, and I think this 24H2 release, more than anything else, is unlocking a bit of the potential that we believed was there but didn't pull through in many of the tests that we saw that reviewers ran, and that's what we're trying to really clear the air about. Is there is a significant amount of uplift to be had with these optimizations, and we want to get it in as many people's hands as quickly as possible.
Okay, Adam, sorry.
Yeah, no. So the other side of the coin is messaging, right? I think a lot of people have felt very confused about what's been coming out over the various outlets. I'm just going to read a pointed question from our friend of the show, Coffee. It says, I've heard different estimates on the uplift of gaming performance on Zen 5 CPUs compared to Zen 4. A couple examples. What is AMD's official statement on this matter right now? Is there how do you summate and say, hey, Zen 4 to Zen 5, on average we have this % uplift, or is there something inherently wrong with even saying kind of on average as well?
Well, I think in our community post, what we said was 5 to 8% improvement on average over the 7000 series is what someone should expect. Now, average kind of takes the outliers on the high and low side out of the equation. I think just like we talked about GPU-bound titles a moment ago, there will be some titles where there is very minimal uplift from Zen 4 to Zen 5. And there will be some titles where there is very significant uplift. I think we especially see that in some esports titles and things where you have really high frame rates. So, I stand by that 5 to 8% on average, but there will definitely be highs and lows that you see that fall outside of that range, and it's all going to depend on what games you care about playing. And I think if I take a step back here and you're looking at the whole of the AMD portfolio for a moment, we think that there are going to be creator applications and games where the 9000 series processors are going to be a really great fit for users who are looking for that little extra bump in performance. But I think, as we saw in many of the reviews, the conclusion that our 7000 series processors offer great price performance for gaming, like that's still going to be true even when we unlock the full potential of what Zen 5 can do, in the Windows operating system, and get these extra bumps through the various enhancements or optimizations that are going into Windows. So I think that no matter whether you're looking for price performance or absolute leadership with X3D with our 7000 series products, or just an overall improvement in productivity and gaming with 9000. We think we've got, kind of a set of solutions for whatever gamers or creators are looking for.
Well, I think a lot of people are like, confused on like, okay, well, why would you even release this separately from the X3D? Why even target gamers on this? I got a question from friend of the show, Sneaky, says, will X3D become gaming category, and then the non X3D parts become workstation categories? Is it just like a messaging thing around how you message the product lines?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that one of the things that we have seen, and an enormous thank you to all of the Ryzen fans out there, is products like the 7800 X3D have been amazingly successful. The adoption rates of those products and the use of that product as just a killer gaming part all around the world has been such a great surprise. Not surprise to us, but such a great reward for a product that really is exceptional at gaming. I can't say whether at some point in time we kind of pivot the way that we think about X3D versus non-X3D products. But what I will say is, even within our 7000 series, depending on what someone's trying to do with their system, how often they're gaming versus doing, other more productivity oriented things with their system, as well as the budget that they have to spend on their total platform, there's not one right answer for everybody, I guess is maybe the best way to say it. And I think that, between 7000, 9000 and X3D, there's lots of choices at many different price points to make sure that we've got a solution for whatever somebody can afford and for whatever somebody is trying to do with their platform.
And can you clarify on why non-X3D and X3D parts are parts of different launch cycles? There's confusion around there as well.
Yeah, I think that you've seen this from us in the past. We've talked before about the X3D technology. It's very very complex. It certainly has a much longer development time associated with it. Again, if I look back at this journey to the launch of the 9000 series processors, what I would say is, in the IPC or instructions per clock data that we collected, as well as looking at just the generational improvement that we saw from Zen 5 over Zen 4, again, admittedly testing in 23H2 with super admin mode enabled. We saw a product that really stood on its own. And we think that, when these optimizations go into play and we unlock all of the performance that's there, I think the world's going to see that as well, that it really is a great product that stands on its own. And, again, back to that comment from a moment ago about choosing the right product at the right price point, even in our 7000 series family, the difference between what a 7800 X3D costs versus a 7700 or a 7700X, there's significant savings there, especially when you think about a product that provides, much of the same performance on many applications. So I think that we saw a product in the 9000 series that really did stand on its own. And I think when these optimizations really, are there for everybody to get their hands on and tap into, we think that Ryzen users will see the same.
Okay. Speaking of a product that stands on its own, we were focusing on gaming here, obviously. That's, one of the lowest bumps for Ryzen 9000. You got to say, creative, day-to-day applications. You're seeing a nice bump out of these. And the AI and server nerds that I know are loving what they're seeing, especially with all the AVX12 and branch predictor changes. So I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about when you're in the process of designing a new chip, how you kind of balance out all those factors. Did you go into this generation saying, hey, we're going to hammer AI and server stuff. We're going to make that excellent this generation around?
I think the AVX 512 enhancements were a very deliberate choice. And that's something where when you look at our enthusiast desktop products, for many generations, our strategy has been to share a CCD or a core chiplet across many different parts of the AMD portfolio. That same Zen 5 core chiplet that's used in a 7000 series Ryzen desktop processor is used in our Threadripper family. It's used in our EPYC server products as well. And so there's a set of choices there that certainly span all of the needs of those spaces. And AVX was one of those areas where we know that especially for higher core count Ryzen And then eventually, as we move into the Threadripper space, those scientific and technical workloads that take advantage of AVX 512 are going to be absolutely killer for a 16 core and above configuration of a Zen 5 product. So, that one definitely planned on making that a core part of what this chip is great at. And I think, what we have always seen and heard from the community is those 16 core parts and 12 core parts, the Ryzen 9s in the family, are really bought by those users that are looking for, heavy creator and scientific workloads. A lot of them running, very virtualized environments, mixed Windows and Linux usage, or Windows with Windows subsystem for Linux usage. And I think all of that is a part of making sure that we've got the best virtualization performance that we can deliver, making sure that we've got, the high core count and high frequency that we can deliver on a heavily multi-threaded workload, and bringing in those enhancements like AVX 512 to make all of those, parts of the portfolio just absolutely sing when we get there.
Okay, that makes sense. I heard you mention moving up into higher core counts than Threadripper. Does that mean we are probably going to get Threadripper 9000?
I was talking about 7,000 Threadripper. Come on.
Oh, all right. Just asking. I like them. I'm glad they're back.
New unannounced products are not on the table today.
Well, I will point out though, for audio listeners, you are wearing a Ryzen Threadripper shirt.
So, I am. It's one of my favorite shirts from. This may have been the 3000 Threadripper launch, but yes, one of my favorite shirts. In the summertime, when it's this hot in Texas, like, you got to go short sleeve shirt. You got to go dry fit. There's no other way.
And I will say, actually, I think the first time we ever interviewed you was at a CES talking about Threadripper. So
yeah, I think that's true.
It seems like it's near and dear to your heart. So
indeed,
yeah.
I have a sort of like a down in the dirt question. Paul Alcorn from Tom's Hardware had touched upon this on his Zen 5 blog story, and that was about the core parking. I know you only got a couple minutes left, but the core parking driver issue that people had, that kind of came up at the last minute. It looks like that's going to be solved where for a regular person it doesn't affect them, but for a reviewer it's a pain because you may have to reinstall the OS to test a different CPU. And that looks like that may be addressed sooner, hopefully.
Well, I think what I would say is, like we mentioned in our community post, right? This is the beginning of a journey to get the most out of Zen 5. And I don't think these branch prediction optimizations that we're talking about today are the end of that journey. We've got a pipeline of things that we're working on to make sure that, through things that we do in our BIOS, in our chipset driver, in provisioning of different core count products in the OS, that we're making that experience as high performance and as seamless as possible. And it's not just a reviewer problem; it's also potentially somebody who changes out their system on the same motherboard, right? There are we want to make that experience as smooth and as easy for every user and reviewer as we possibly can. And so, like, we've got a long list that we're working through of how we drive every ounce of performance out of Zen 5 with both the things that we do, the things that we do through the operating system, as well as things that we do with ISV partners. So, this is the beginning of the story, not the end of the story in our minds.
Nice. I do have a couple more questions, but
Sure.
Gordon, I don't know.
I do have one more. I can ask it after. You should go. You want me to go first?
Go for it. Yeah.
So I do want to address this because I think is AMD blaming reviewers? Did hardware reviewers screw this up? Are they all at fault for this from your point of view?
Not at all. Not at all. I think that at the end of the day, what happened here is there were a series of decisions that AMD made that differed from how reviewers were testing that led to different conclusions. This is not saying that reviewers did anything wrong or that there's anything in the process of how these reviews were done that was incorrect. I think, like I said, we were as puzzled by some of the results that reviewers were seeing as the Ryzen fans are out there in the world. And I think that that's what's really led us to this sort of multi-layered conclusion that there's a number of factors going on here that created that separation. This is no shade whatsoever on reviewers or how they tested. This is completely on things that we didn't really understand as a part of the way that we tested and configured our products, and how that differed from both reviewer game suites moving in a slightly different direction, as well as how they tested the product versus how we did. So not a criticism of reviewers at all or how they test. Simply, some significant differences in setup and configuration that got us from point A to point B, and I think we understand that now.
I got a good question from Dark Helmet. If the entire software stack, between Zen 5 architecture, Microsoft, the new updates coming in 24H2, wasn't ready, why not wait to release this processor?
That is a very good question, and I think it's one that also has a little bit of nuance to it. So I mentioned a moment ago that many of our OEM notebook systems with our Ryzen AI 300 processors are already shipping on 24H2. I think the truth is there is absolutely better timing and more optimization that could have been done to tie these two things together. And I think if we had it all, we had it to do all over again, this would have been something where all of this would have been perfectly lined up and converged to the point where reviewers saw the same performance that we did out of the box. But I truly believe that the way that we went about testing this product and kind of the like I said, blind spot we had to how much impact this had in performance results that we saw in particular in games, really made us not tie those two together in as tightly coupled a way as they should have been.
Okay. I know we're running out of time, so yeah, I'll stop the questions there, Gordon, if you want to help wrap
take
it up.
us out, or
yeah.
Unless there's let me just say one thing, Gordon. I do want to thank you all, thank the entire reviewer community, as well as our Ryzen fans out there for their patience. I know that this has been a very bumpy journey over the past couple of weeks to understand what Ryzen 9000 series is all about. And I think, like I said a couple of times here, I think we finally have our arms around the factors that led to those differences. I truly believe we've got a product here that stands on its own and is going to deliver great performance, whether you're a creator or a gamer. And I just want to thank everybody for their patience to get to this point and kind of have clarity now around how we go forward and how we get the most out of Zen 5.
Cool. Thank you. And thanks for coming, David. So should I take us out, Adam?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, we're running out of time.
So check back next week for your Fix a PC Talk on the Full Nerd. For audio listeners, subscribe to us on iTunes, Pocket Casts, or Spotify. And if you are on one of the services, please review. Every time you do, AMD issues a new T-shirt celebrating Ryzen Threadripper. Send questions and comments to the Full Nerd at PCWorld. Thanks for coming. I'm Gordon Ung with Brad Charkis.
Adios, y'all.
Adam Patrick Murray.
Last question, David. Alien or Aliens? Which is the better movie?
Oh gosh, I got to go with the original.
Okay, thank you, David. Thank you, David. Thanks for coming on. Love to have you back anytime.
To talk aliens.
I was going to say, and thank David McAfee from AMD for coming on to help clear the air on some things that have been going on. But now that he's an Alien fan of Aliens, I just don't know.
Oh my.
But anyway, I do thank you, David, for coming on the show.
Thanks very much, guys. Really appreciate the time.
And Willis is going to hit the out switch.
All right. Thank you, Gordon. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We will see you next time. Bye.